The body of Matt Brown was found in a river in Washington state earlier this weekend, and I spoke with 3 of his siblings earlier today. They said they're reeling from the loss, but finding his body after 3 days of searching has provided some finality.
Matt Brown did not disappear quietly. The eldest Brown child, the one who smiled widest on camera, was found in a river, 43 years old, gone. But the real story did not begin at that riverbank. It began years earlier, in the dark, when Matt sat alone and started dismantling every lie his family had built for millions of viewers. He told the truth, and truth, in that family, came with a price nobody warned him about. A confession that cost him everything. A fall that happened in plain sight. A death that left more questions than answers. Stay with us, because the full truth is darker than any headline. The morning everything changed. On May 31, 2026, Bear Brown sat down in front of his camera. His eyes were red.
All right, I have some really bad news about Matt that I wanted to share with y'all guys.
His hands were not steady, and before he said a single word, anyone watching could already tell that what was coming was not good news. He confirmed it slowly. The body recovered from the Okanogan River in northeastern Washington had been positively identified.
I wanted to update y'all guys. I just got word a few hours ago that they pulled the body from the river and it was positively identified as Matt.
It was his older brother Matt, 43 years old. Gone.But did not rush through it. He stopped mid-sentence. He started again. His voice cracked in places where he was clearly trying to hold it together, and in other places where he simply could not. There is a specific kind of grief that shows itself not in crying, but in the pauses between words, and that is exactly what this was. The announcement itself was devastating, but the detail sitting just underneath it was what made it almost unbearable to process. Bear explained that his brother Noah had been part of the private search party that located the body. Noah was not just informed afterward. Noah was there. He was one of the people who helped pull Matt from the water.
Noah Brown, quote, helped them pull the body out of the water and was the first family member to identify Matt's body.
He was the one standing at that riverbank making the identification. Take a moment with that. A brother pulling a brother from a river. A brother being the one to say, yes, that is him. That is a weight that does not leave a person. And it is a detail that got lost quickly under the larger headline, which is exactly the kind of thing that happens when grief moves faster than people can keep up with. Bear also addressed something that had been building online in the days before the confirmation. People had been saying the family had abandoned Matt, that they had walked away and left him to fall apart without support. Bear pushed back on that directly. He said the situation was far more complicated than what any post or comment was capturing. He did not get into specifics, but he was clear that the version spreading online was not the full picture. Then he said something that deserves more attention than it received. He brought up one of Matt's final videos, a video where Matt had spoken openly about how much the negative comments on his posts had affected him, and Bear looked into his camera and said, plainly and without dressing it up, the person on the other side of your screen is a real human being. Words hurt more than you think they do from where you are sitting. That was not a polite reminder at the end of a grief video. That was a man telling the world, as directly as he could, that the cruelty his brother absorbed from strangers in his final months was not a small thing. It landed, it stayed, and Bear believed it played a real role in where things ended up. The coroner had not yet released an official ruling, but what was already clear was that a man who had survived addiction, estrangement, and years of public judgment had reached a point that no one who watched him, not his family, not his followers, had fully seen coming. The confirmation on May 31 was the end of the story. But to understand what it meant, You have to go back to where it started 5 days earlier at a river in Washington State, when a stranger made a phone call that set everything in motion. 5 days on the river. It started on a Wednesday morning. On May 27, 2026, a 911 caller reported seeing a man sitting in the shallow water of the Okanogan River near Oroville, Washington. The caller looked away for a brief moment. When they turned back, the man was face down in the current and moving downstream. That phone call started a search that would last 5 days and end in the worst possible way. A family member reported having seen Matt that same morning near the Driscoll Island Wildlife Area, roughly a mile from where the 911 call was made. A backpack was found near the water. Inside was an empty holster. The gun it had held was believed to be somewhere downstream, submerged in the river. Dispatch audio obtained by multiple news outlets,
The videos showing Matt chugging malt liquor armed with a gun,
referenced a suicidal man who had reportedly shot himself before entering the water. That detail had not been officially confirmed at the time, and the full circumstances were still being pieced together. The Okanogan County Sheriff's Office launched a full search operation. Divers entered the water. Cadaver dogs worked along the banks. Sonar equipment was brought in to sweep the river floor. A boat crew from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife joined the effort. Brother Gabe was reported at the scene and in direct contact with law enforcement. For 2 days, the search continued. Methodical, grim, and then the weather changed. A severe storm moved through the area, and river conditions became too dangerous for safe operations. The official search was suspended. The river was not giving anything back yet. On May 29, 2 days after the initial call, Bear posted publicly for the first time. He said he believed his brother was gone. He said he had been told Matt had taken his own life near the river. He was holding on to the smallest possible chance the information was wrong. But his voice carried the sound of someone who had already accepted a truth they were desperately hoping to be incorrect about. In that same video, he said something that is worth sitting with. He said he had never believed Matt would end things this way. He had always feared the addiction would eventually win an overdose, a relapse that went one step too far. That was the ending he had spent years quietly dreading. But this, he said, was not something he would have predicted. That distinction matters, because it tells you that even the people closest to Matt, the ones who knew about the drinking, the relapses, the years of struggle, did not see this specific ending coming. Which means something shifted in those final weeks, that the people who loved him were not close enough to see in time. 2 days after Bear's video, the private search team found the body. Noah made the identification at the riverbank. Bear went live and told the world, and the 5 days between May 27 and May 31, the search, the storm, the silence, the confirmation only make full sense when you understand what Matt's life had looked like in the weeks and months before anyone knew to go looking for him. The signs had been there. They were just easier to scroll past than to stop and read what he was already showing. The warning signs were not buried. They were posted publicly, in real time, on platforms where thousands of people were watching. The problem was not that nobody could see them. The problem was that almost nobody knew how to read them. In the weeks before he disappeared, Matt was still active on YouTube and Instagram. His channel bio described a man living quietly in recovery, focused on self-growth and honest content. The words sounded stable. The videos told a different story entirely. Around the middle of May, Matt live-streamed himself sitting in a public park in Washington State. He appeared visibly distressed. People watching in real time described him as confused, possibly intoxicated, and behaving in a way that made them uncomfortable. This was not a recovery check-in. It was not an adventure clip. It was a person in an open and visible crisis, broadcasting it live to strangers, and the audience watching had no real way to reach through the screen and help him. Comments came in. Some were supportive, others were not, and Matt, in that condition, was reading all of them. Then there was May 10, 3 weeks before his death. Matt posted a video describing how he had spent the previous night sleeping in a cemetery. He had no safe place to sleep, so he found a quiet spot between two graves and stayed there until morning. He mentioned that his late father had once told him cemeteries were good resting places while traveling because no one would disturb you there. He was using advice from a father who was already gone to get through a night alone with nowhere to go. At the end of that video, he looked into his camera. He gestured to his head and his heart, and he told his audience he was doing fine. He thanked everyone for their support and encouragement. He was sleeping in a graveyard. He had almost nothing, and he looked into a camera and said he was okay. The vast majority of people who watched that video believed him and kept scrolling. That is not a criticism of his audience. People believe what they are shown, and Matt had spent years learning how to present a version of himself that looked functional even when it was not. That skill, the ability to perform stability, was something the show had trained into him over a long period of time. It did not disappear just because the cameras from Discovery Channel were gone. His mother, Ami, had been rushed to the hospital on April 11, 2026, dealing with COVID and pneumonia at the same time. She was 61 years old and had already been through a lung cancer diagnosis in 2017 and multiple serious hospitalizations in the years that followed. The family was carrying that fear quietly while Matt was posting videos from park benches and cemetery grounds. He was watching his mother's health fall apart from a distance. With no stable roof over his head, telling the internet he was grateful and growing. The gap between what he was showing and what he was living was wider than anyone watching fully understood. The confession that cost him everything. Billy Brown died on February 7, 2021. He was 68 years old.
Matt Brown was found dead in Washington's Okanagan River on May 30th, the Okanagan County Sheriff's Office confirmed.
A seizure took him without much warning. Bear announced it on Instagram and called his father their best friend and one of a kind. The response from the show's audience was immediate. Years of Friday night viewing had made Billy feel familiar to millions of people who had never met him. Matt reportedly made it back in time. He and Billy had reconciled before the end, and Matt was there to say goodbye. That part of the story, at least, did not end with distance between them. But when season 13 aired its memorial episode, Matt was not in it. His scenes had been cut from the broadcast entirely. The rest of the family appeared on screen, grieving together, remembered together. Matt was absent without explanation. No statement was released about whose decision it was or why it happened the way it did. For a man who had already been pushed to the edges of his own family's story, being cut from his father's memorial episode was a specific kind of erasure that is hard to overstate. 2 months later, on April 11, 2021, Matt sat down alone outside at night and recorded a video. He was barely visible against the dark sky behind him. His voice was quiet but steady. He said he knew he was not supposed to share other people's secrets. But he said those secrets were destroying him. He was cold. He had almost nothing to eat. And then he started talking. He said the show had misrepresented how the family actually lived. He alleged that producers had provided his parents with drugs he named cocaine specifically, and that this had shaped the environment in which his own addiction developed. He alleged that his father had controlled all the money the family earned from the show, and that he had personally been denied access to roughly $360,000 that he found documented in paperwork his mother had processed after Billy's death. He said when he asked his mother for $100 for food, she told him no. Bear responded within a short time. He called the claims horrible lies about a man who had been gone only a few months, and said Matt needed professional help. Discovery Channel never issued a public response. The allegations have never been independently verified and remain Matt's account alone. But step back from the specific claims for a moment and look at what the video actually was. A man sitting alone in the dark, cold, with barely any food, deciding he was finally done, carrying a version of events that had been weighing on him for years. That is not someone performing for an audience. That is someone who has simply run out of reasons to stay quiet. The response from most of his family was not to reach toward him. It was to pull back further, and the distance that was created between Matt and the people who were supposed to be closest to him never fully closed again. The life behind the camera, Matthew Jeremiah Brown, was born on September 7, 1982, in Fort Worth, Texas. He did not grow up the way most American kids did. His father, Billy, moved the family to a remote stretch of the Alaska Panhandle when Matt was still a toddler. The nearest town required a 20-minute boat ride to reach. There were no neighborhood kids to play with, no school building to walk to, almost no contact with the outside world at all. Billy and Amy homeschooled all 7 children themselves, and the family operated as a unit that existed almost entirely on its own terms. Billy called them a wolf pack. That was not just a phrase, it was the rule the household ran on. Growing up that way shapes a person in ways that are hard to undo later. Matt had no real framework for the outside world, no experience navigating institutions, no practice building a life that did not revolve entirely around his family. When the outside world eventually came for him, through cameras, through audiences, through public scrutiny, he had almost no tools to handle it with. When Alaskan Bush People premiered on May 6, 2014, Matt stepped into the role of the talkative eldest son, the survival expert, the warm, rough presence who carried the family's identity on his shoulders and made it look natural. By 2015, the show was pulling nearly 5 million viewers, and Matt was a genuine part of why those numbers were that high. He was watchable. He was real feeling. He connected with people through a screen in a way that not everyone can do. What those viewers were not seeing was the machinery behind the image. Between filming sessions, the family was staying in lodges, rather than the remote homestead the show kept presenting as their permanent home. A grand jury indictment in 2014 for falsifying permanent fund dividend applications benefits available only to Alaska. Residents confirmed what critics had been pointing out for years. The identity the show was built on was, at minimum, heavily shaped by production. The born wild, never tamed. Story was real in some ways and constructed in others, and the line between those two things was never made clear to the audience watching. Matt knew where that line was. He had lived on both sides of it his entire life. The first public sign of his private struggle appeared before the show even finished its first season. On August 30, 2013, he borrowed a woman's car after drinking at a bar in Juneau, hit a parked motorcycle in a parking lot, and drove away from the scene. When police caught up with him, his blood alcohol level was nearly twice Alaska's legal limit. In February 2014, he was sentenced to 3 days in jail and 18 months of probation. Most of the people watching the show on Friday nights never knew it happened. By 2016, things had gotten bad enough that Matt entered inpatient treatment for 35 days. He spoke about it honestly afterward in an interview with People magazine. He said he could see himself spiraling more withdrawn, slower, no longer interested in the things that used to matter to him. He traced the drinking back to a period in Juneau where he gradually started spending more time around people who drank heavily. What began occasionally became constant. When he came out of treatment, he sounded like someone who had genuinely turned a corner. He told the publication he had turned his weakness into a strength, and that not everyone makes it back from where he had been. He was glad to be one of the ones who did. That hope did not hold. By 2018, he had relapsed and entered the Betty Ford Center in California. Billy told reporters at the time that they would rather lose him from home for a little while than lose him forever. No one in that conversation knew how those words would sound years later. After that second treatment stay, Matt never returned to the show. The family relocated to Washington State in 2018 without him. Around the same time, 2 women came forward with allegations that Matt had sexually assaulted them in separate incidents in California. The Los Angeles County District Attorney reviewed the matter and declined to prosecute due to insufficient evidence. No charges were ever filed, but the combination of the relapse, the removal from the show, and the allegations meant his relationship with most of his family had entered a place with no clear path back. The man who grew up performing a constructed version of himself for millions of strangers was the same man who ended up sleeping alone in a cemetery with nowhere to go. The distance between those 2 images holds the full weight of this story. What this story is really about, Matt Brown's death, does not belong only to the Brown family or to Discovery Channel's ratings history. Bear kept returning to the same point across every update he posted during those days.
Bear Brown says his brother Matt Brown has been found dead after going missing. He confirmed it in a video posted to his verified social media channels on May 31st.
The people watching from the outside did not have the full picture. Matt's life was layered and painful in ways no headline could capture, and cruelty from strangers online is not without consequences. More than 28 former reality television stars have died by suicide since the mid-2000s, according to multiple separate tallies. These shows extract real drama from real human beings. They build audiences around vulnerability, and then they release those people back into ordinary life with no support structure, no follow-up care, and a level of public scrutiny that follows them permanently. Matt had his addiction. He had his estrangement. He had his grief. But he was also carrying something almost never discussed: the specific burden of being the only person in his family willing to say out loud that the story they had all been performing was never entirely real. The honesty that cost him his place on the show and his relationships within his family was the same honesty that made his YouTube followers feel like they genuinely knew him. He built a community out of his willingness to be truthful about failure, and then watched parts of that same community use that openness as a target. Bear made clear that Matt felt those comments deeply in his final months. His mother, Amy, was still recovering from illness when her eldest son died. The family that millions of Americans watched build fires and catch fish on their Friday nights is now living with a loss that no camera could properly frame. Matt Brown was 43 years old. He was the eldest of 7. He was the only one who stood up and said the story being sold to millions of viewers was not entirely real. He paid a price for that honesty that almost nobody watching from their couch stopped to calculate. The people who loved him and the millions of strangers who watched him through a screen and told themselves they truly knew who he was are only now beginning to sit with the possibility that they may never have fully known him at all. Matt Brown's story is not just about one man or one family. It is about what happens when real people are turned into characters and what it costs them when the cameras stop. He survived years of addiction, family silence, and public judgment. He told the truth when telling the truth had a price, and in the end, the world that watched him grow up was not watching closely enough when it mattered most. If this video made you think differently about the people you watch on a screen, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share this with someone who needs to hear this story. Subscribe if you want more real stories told the right way. Matt Brown deserved better. Let's make sure we remember that.